So any questions? Assignments due Monday. How is it due?
Yeah.
You know, that's a great question.
Grading class?
How about will my office hours work if we do like 2 to 4?
Can you load it up on iPhone and bring it to you? Sure.
You can. I'd like to look at your code too, though.
Can I just do it right now?
If we get to class, we will report it.
Yeah, we do the grading in class.
All right. So how about for those of you that have it done already, just show it to me after class. Question? Yes.
As far as loading things on our iPhones, we have to have our UDID input by the administrator for our Apple group. And so, when are you going to start doing that? Because we can't authorize our devices until we do that.
Right. So for some reason, I thought you would be able to just update it yourself, like put it in yourself, and then I would be able to approve it.
I have my, because we get the certificate,
Right.
and I've been approved for that, but it says don't update your phone with developer software firmware until after you input our UDID, or else it'll disable the device.
Okay. So I will put something on the news group that will tell you to install a certain application that will then you can use to email me your UDID, and then I'll input that in, and yeah, so I'll get that going over the weekend.
I guess, how do we get to that point where we can push out the device?
So that's exactly, it's related to his question. So basically, what's going to have to happen is you're going to have to send me your device ID, and then I'm going to add it to our little provisioning thing, and then you're going to generate some certificates and go through this long process that's really annoying, but you get used to it after a while. So over this weekend, we'll take care of that.
How are you going to push that app to our phones if we don't have...
Well, I'm going to give you a link to the app. It's an application on the App Store. It's called Beta Helper. You can look at it right now if you want. And yeah, but I'll post something to the news group. The website hasn't been seeing much action because my password got disabled for some reason. I've had that account for ever and ever, and now suddenly the password has been whatevered. So anyways, I'll get that back up. For now, I'll just be doing everything through the news group as we have been doing. Any other questions? Okay, then we can get started. Okay, so we know the assignment's due Monday, and basically you're going to find me somehow between now and then, and we'll take care of it. Hopefully we'll figure something out for the next one. Something I haven't mentioned yet, if you haven't started thinking about your final project yet, then you really should be. Surf the iTunes store, do whatever, start looking wherever it is you need to look for inspiration. And yeah, because I think we only have like 2 or 3 weeks, and then it's time for you to tell me what your final application is going to be. And then we've got 4 weeks, and December 4th, I think, is the last day of class, and we need to have applications done by then. So, okay, yes?
Are there any general guidelines or requirements for the project?
So, are there any general guidelines for the project, or the final project? So basically, find something that interests you or that you think would be a fun application. It should have some sort of substance to it. While a little flashlight application would be great, that's probably not going to fly. So I guess over the next week or so, I'll think about trying to nail down some more specifics. But in general, it's do whatever you want to do, but have it be something significant that you could actually, significant enough that, you could do in 4 weeks if you start in a few weeks, or something that you could do over 6 weeks if you start today. So I'll nail down some specifics before then. Yes?
Are we to assume that by the time the final projects roll around, we're going to have ample experience with OpenGL, so we can do graphics type stuff, or should we not go that direction?
Chances are, like there's so many things to cover. I would like to do some OpenGL. It's just, so anyone in here who's taking 175, they're spending 10 weeks learning all that stuff. And while I think I could do an introduction, I think I would need at least 2 lectures, and I need to figure out if there's some things that are more important for you to know besides that. So if that's the route you're planning on going, come see me, and then I might be able to point you to some reasonable books that will help get you going quickly.
Okay. So in the meantime, we should probably stick with non-graphics intensive type things, though, for ideas for the final project.
Again, it's sky's the limit. You don't have to. So there's some people in here who are already doing stuff that have nothing to do with what I've presented. So I feel like after today's lecture, definitely after the next lecture, you will all essentially have enough of the basics to where you can go off and do anything you feel like doing. You have enough of an understanding of the iPhone and doing some simple applications for it and knowing where all the documentation is and that sort of stuff, that now you'll be able to go off and use Core Audio or use whatever things I haven't covered yet, map type stuff. So if you have some visual thing that you want to do, then just know it's going to probably take a chunk of time if you don't know OpenGL, for example, if that's the route you're going to take. If you're thinking of like a 2D game, again, I can point folks to little game engines that are sort of already written, so you can focus on writing your game and not writing the game engine. Yeah, there's just so much material with the iPhone. It's okay. All right. So today we're going to spend a little bit of time looking at the model view controller design pattern, and then we're going to look at view controllers. And by look at them, basically, I'm going to sit down and we're going to work through a project similar to what we've done a number of times now, except this time around we'll actually include a more reasonable, a slightly more substantial model, and then we'll also look at creating an additional view controller and how to transition from one view controller to the other one. So we'll set up like a person class, a person model, and we'll have a view that displays some information, the name and age, for example, and then we'll have a screen where you can edit that information and some text fields, and you can edit it on using a different view controller and then bouncing back. So let's get going. Again, as usual, if you don't hear me in the back, just wave or do something, and I'll do my best. Okay, so have most folks in here taken ECS 160, the software engineering course? No? Okay. Well, have you guys heard about design patterns in some other course or something? Yes. A little bit? Okay, so design patterns are basically, you can almost think of them as little recipes. So as you solve problems throughout your career, you're going to find that you run into the same sort of problem over and over and over again, or you'll find a set of these sorts of problems. And what some folks have done is they've sort of sat down and cataloged these types of problems that tend to happen, and they provide some solutions for them, some architectural solutions, for example. So in this case, we have the MVC pattern, the model view controller pattern, which so it was introduced in the 1970s with this language Smalltalk, which I've never actually used, but and basically what it does, the model view controller pattern is a high-level application architecture pattern. So far, every time we've been creating a sample project or using the template, a lot of the things that have been put into place for us are elements of this model view controller pattern. If you've used Ruby on Rails, for example, they like to say that they're opinionated software, where they try to make web application development easier for you by imposing this model view controller pattern on you. So you don't have to worry about the architecture of your application. You just worry about the various components. So so these components or these subsystems are models, views, and controllers. And model objects tend to represent your data and sort of the functions or the business logic to let you interact with those objects. So, for example, say you have a credit card object. Maybe one of the methods on that credit card object is something that validates whether the credit card number you try to assign to it is valid. So if I say credit card, set number, and it's, so set number would look at the number I pass in and determine that that's not a good number and say, sorry, I'm not letting this number in. So, it sort of provides the interface that lets data in and out and sort of some validation. What's interesting about model objects is they tend to be reusable, and that's because it's just data and functions. So if you create a model object that represents a person, a dog, a book, a catalog of books, you can probably take that from one application and move it into another application fairly easily. The view objects are basically, it's the visual representation of your model. So a model can have a number of different views. So maybe I have a pie chart or a bar graph. It's maybe it's the same data, but it's just displayed in a different way. Or maybe I have a button or a slider. So the views also let users interact with the model. So if I have a slider and it represents some sort of value of interest, as I move that slider along, I get to see something happening visually, and in some way it's telling the model to change, and that's actually where the controller objects come in. So the controller is basically the thing that ties or hooks the model and the view together, and so it just plays this intermediary role where if I interact with the view, it will first go through the controller, and then the controller will send that information along to the model. And vice versa, if for some reason my model has changed and my view needs to be updated, again, it will go from the model to the controller and to the view. So we've seen this a bit already in a bunch of the samples that we've done in lecture, for example, where we've always been setting up this view-based application, and inside that view-based application we have a view controller, and inside Interface Builder we would have buttons, for example, and when we press that button it would trigger some sort of action, and that action is something that we've been implementing inside controllers. So then the controller would would execute that action and do whatever it is we asked it to do. So a quick visual of at least how the model view controller pattern is set up for the iPhone or in Cocoa, the libraries that we're using. It's a little bit different than what the standard model view controller setup is, but if you're curious, you can read up on design patterns and learn more about it. But as far as we're concerned for the iPhone, so we have our model view and our controller, and really it almost should be model controller view or something, because controller's always hanging out in the middle. And for example, if we have our view and the user does something, pushes a button, well, that triggers some action that the controller is going to handle, and maybe that action is something that changes our model, so it's going to go ahead and do something to the model. So maybe we've entered some text in a text field, and we hit submit, that text is taken and put into some sort of, into a model. And again, if for whatever reason something happens on the back end and the model changes, and it's important for the view to be able to represent the inaccurate state of the model, well, the controller again would tell the view, hey, set your slider value to this new value. So does that model view controller, is that fairly clear? Any questions about? Okay, so on to view controllers then, and so again, what I'm going to try and do is implement a little application. Again, we're going to do a view-based application, and actually next week we're going to look and see navigation-based tab bar applications, so things start getting a little more interesting next week, and with some of that stuff. Okay, so we're going to choose a view-based application, and we will call it I don't know, let's just call our application person. And I need to update the thing here. Does that look okay in the back? Okay, so let's see here. So let's take a look at our default view controller has nothing going on. Let's set up our model. So classes, control click, add new file, and in this case it's going to be a Cocoa Touch class. So we're going to make an Objective-C class, and it's a subclass of NSObject, much like most things are. And let's call it person. And you want it to also make the .h, so that should be checked by default there. And let's set up our person to have a name and an age. And let's set up some properties for this. And as I do this, so these are all things that we've seen in one form or another so far. If right now you don't know what a property is and what I've written here means, feel free to ask and I'll help you out. Okay, so we've got some properties, and usually, let's also make, yes, Blake? So the assigned property, so maybe we've seen retain and copy, and what happens in this case is I'm using assign. If we look at age, it's not an NSObject. It's a standard type, a plain old data type. In this case, an integer. if somebody accesses this property, the setter property, basically what you're going to do is just do an assignment. So if I say person object dot age equals 5, it's just going to go ahead and assign the 5. Versus if we were looking at the person object with name, we would actually be incrementing the retain count of the object being passed in. So let's also set up an initializer, and let's see, let's call it init with name, and we'll do our ns string, and we'll call it new name. So init with name, and age. And that's going to be an int and new age. So we've set up, we'll have that initializer, and let's also do a little something different where we'll set up a class method instead of an instance method, where what we'll do is this will be sort of like a little helper where someone, so whenever somebody uses init with name age, they have to call alloc. So it'll be, object alloc init with name, and then they have to release that object and do some other things. So what we can do is we can make a little helper object where, if the person, maybe for whatever reason they don't want to deal with the allocation themselves directly, or if you have just a situation where you just want to make it a little easier for people to access your object. So let's create a person object. So, we can just say person with name, new name, age, new age. So it looks pretty much the same, and we'll see in a second how to use this. So last time, I think, or the time before, we finished up with auto-release. So we'll see how auto-release works in this particular case. So we have our person, we've got a name, we've got some properties, we have some initialization stuff. So let's head over to the implementation file, and we want to synthesize name and synthesize age. So this is our way of telling the compiler, hey, we have these properties, go ahead and make the setters and getters for us. And what I like to do, I generally like to put my dealloc method right at the top, just so that, I don't forget to deallocate or take care of things. So in this case, again, based on our rules, we're using this retain. So what we'll want to do is we can either say self.name equals nil. So in order to actually make use of those properties, they have to go through self. If you just say name, it's not going to actually call any of the setters or getters for you. So someone asked about that or mentioned that they ran into a problem with that. It's not like C++ where when you take an instance variable and or a member variable and just put its name, that it sort of defaults to putting this in front of it. That doesn't work that way in Objective-C. So in this case, what we're doing is saying, okay, self.name equals nil. So by doing this, we're going to be accessing this particular property, which has this retain setter semantic. So basically what this will do first, yes, Jeff?
What's the synthesize lines?
So the synthesize lines, basically, so we have these properties that we've declared. Synthesize tells the compiler, hey, go ahead and write these for me. Write me a setter and a getter. So set name or name to just access name. So in this line here, we're actually saying self.name, so we're calling a setter. And what it will first do, because we're assigning nil, well, it will release, it will send a release message to name because we've retained something. That'll get released, and then we'll have assigned nil to it. So you'll see that quite often. The other way, of course, we can do this is to say name release. And the difference being here that when we do self.name equals nil, we assign nil to the variable. So in Objective-C, if I haven't mentioned this yet, you can send a message to nil. So when you can call a method on nil, and the system just says, oh, that doesn't make sense, so I'm just going to ignore it. Versus like in C++, for example, if you have an object that's null and you try to call a method on it, you're going to get some sort of segmentation fault or some bad memory access. Yes, Trevor.
The whole self.name, when I was working in the browser, I made several like UI buttons and graphics, and by the name I put self. Is that required all the time?
So usually, if you want it to make use of the property semantics that you've set, then you would generally want to access them through self. There are situations where, for example, if you wanted to, say you allocate an object and you're being lazy and you don't want to actually release it at that point, what you can say is, well, my object's name equals this object. And now in my dealloc, I'm doing name release, so I know it'll get taken care of. Versus, so why don't I just do an example of it here. So name equals ns string alloc init, whatever, with contents of file, say that there's some file there. And so by having done this, right, in this case so name now has a retained count of 1 because we've called alloc on it. And of course this is happening in dealloc the way I'm showing it here, so that's not quite nice, but say it's happening somewhere else. And at some point in the future, person objects gets deallocated, so the name is released, so everything's fine. What you could do is you could say self.name, and now what happens is, so alloc has a retained count of 1. We're using the setter semantic, which is retain. So when this thing gets assigned to name, retain count's going to go up to 2. So in this case, I've written it sort of badly. ns string s. So if we do this sort of thing, then what we need to now do is say self release or s release to get rid of that string, and the retain count is back to 1 now. So it's sort of like this laziness thing, which as you understand the memory allocation and how it works more and more, you will start kind of just doing things that you know are the right things to do. In general, don't be lazy at this stage. Just be clear about what you're doing with stuff. Okay, so let's take this route right now. So we're deallocating our object. Let's go ahead and set up the initializer, id init.
Question?
Yes.
Did you also call dealloc first for dealloc?
Yes, thank you very much. So usually when you deallocate, you want to get rid of your stuff, and then you want to tell the base class to go ahead and dealloc as well. Thank you very much for pointing that out. So let's write our init with name, and that's all nice. And so here we'll go self.name equals new name. And because age is just an int, we can either go self.age, or we can just assign it directly. Again, if maybe these things become more important here now. So if you do have something like atomic, that might mean you have some threads going on, so you would want to make sure you're accessing your, I'll get to you in a sec, so if you have multiple threads, you want to make sure you're going through your setter, because the setter that the compiler creates for you will go ahead and put in place sort of the locks and mutexes that are needed there to protect the variable. So there was a question, yes?
Would it make a difference if we would write name dealloc instead of name release? Same thing, or?
So you do not want to call dealloc yourself. So this is a method you won't call yourself. You want to say release, because release just tells the system, hey, go ahead and do what you do, which is decrement the retain count, and if the retain count goes to 0, go ahead and clean it up. So you do not want to call dealloc yourself on your own objects like that. Yeah. In this particular case, we've gone super dealloc just as our way of telling our parent, go ahead and clean up. Okay, so we have our initializer, and now let's create the class method that I guess we called pretty much the same thing. So what we can do in this case is we can say return, and what we will do is person alloc init, and we can just pass in the new name and the new age. And so again, since we're calling alloc, we're responsible for cleaning up after ourselves by calling release at some point, or in this case what we're going to do is say auto release. And so what happens now is basically anyone that calls this class method person with name will get a person, and they'll have it for some period of time, and eventually when they're done with it, unless they've retained it, the system will auto-release it. So when the run loop or the event loop goes through whatever it needs to go through, what it'll do at some point is go ahead and send release to this object that's being created. So it's interesting because I was just in an interview yesterday where the person we were interviewing, this was essentially the question they were asked. They were like, so what does auto-release do? And then it was like, they went into explaining whatever they felt auto-release did. So this is like a very basic fundamental thing. So I think we discussed auto-release last time. If it's not clear, yes?
Flags it to the garbage collector?
So on the iPhone, we don't have any garbage collection. So all this does is it basically it basically puts it in a pool where at some point the objects that live in that pool are going to be sent a release message. So so the system can clean them up at that point. So again, on the iPhone, we don't have garbage collection. We have this reference counted memory system. If you're on OS X writing stuff for the Mac, then Objective-C 2.0 introduced a garbage collector recently, and I haven't played with any of that. Okay, so let me fix up init with name, because I always seem to do this when I write initializers in front of people. What you want to do first is make sure that you want to initialize your parent. So if not self equal super init, so we're giving the NS object a chance to take care of itself. So if that doesn't work out, return nil. Otherwise, we're going to go on and pass through and take care of whatever we need to take care of here, and then we're going to return self. Typo? Oh, thank you. Self.age equals new age. All right, thank you very much. Okay, so that's sort of the basics of this class. This is our model. we have a simple person that has a name and an age, and we could fill it with all sorts of other things, but I think that'll do for now. So let's jump over to, so the person is the M in our model view controller. Now let's jump over to our view controller, which again is this thing that's going to mediate between models and views. And let's do a forward declaration of person. So that should look similar to C++. So we could include the header file, but we don't need to in this case. We can just do that forward declaration. Person, my person. So we can set that up, and while we're here, so now we're in the view controller, let's also set up some view type stuff so we can actually see some information about the person. So maybe we will, let's set up two labels, one that's the name, one that's the age. Name label, age label. And let's set these up as some properties, and we'll make these outlets that will be available to us in inside Interface Builder. And we'll set up our age. Okay, so we have those, and let's go ahead and synthesize them.
Can you slow down just a little bit?
Sure. So yeah, I'm going fast because we've done this a bunch now. So sort of the expectation is you sort of understand what's going on a bit. But the other thing is, hopefully, I don't know when this is going to go up online, but I can give you this code. I can post whatever we write today to the news group at the end of class, so you can look through it then. But unfortunately, I need to move more quickly today because we have to get to the part where we have a second view controller that we connect in. And
that was all the time I needed.
Okay.
Those 2 seconds.
Good. All right, cool. Okay, so we have our person view controller. And let's take a look at our resources. So we know we have our nib file there. So we have some outlets. Let's go ahead and set up the view in there. And let me get rid of this. And don't save. Okay, so Command-Shift-L gets you this guy. And we want a label. So we'll set up one label, two labels, and we'll leave them blank for now. Hopefully I can still see them in here. So let's connect them to, okay, we'll put the name label up top, age label down below. So now we've made these connections, and great. So we have some connections. We haven't really done anything. We haven't stuck any information inside these views. So now we'll take a look. Again, we're back in the person view controller, and what we're going to do is we're going to implement this this view did load method. So what happens when this view is constructed before it's actually displayed, you get a callback saying, hey, the view did load. So basically at this point you can do any other sorts of initialization. So similar, they're saying right there in the comment, implement this to do additional setup after loading the view, typically from a nib. So that seems to be exactly what we're doing. So we'll tell our parent view to go ahead and do its thing. And for us, so view did load happens once. So the view will get created, and then it'll sort of just hang out there. If the system deallocates the view controller, the view for some reason, and then it gets recreated, then this will get called again. But as long as it's living and around in memory, this will happen once. So because of that, this would be a good place for us to set up our person. And I'm going to go ahead and make person a property as well. Or make a person property. Of course, this one is not an outlet, it's just a property. And we'll synthesize that one as well. My person, I believe is what I called it. Yes. So because this thing loads up after the view has been allocated, it's a good place for us to actually go ahead and create our person object. So we can say self.myPerson, I thought was there, equals, and I haven't included it yet, so we saw that I did a forward declaration of person here. In the implementation, I actually need to go ahead and include our person here. So now we'll call that class method that was, person with name, and let's call the person Bob Dole, and he is, 87 years old. So what's happening here, right? We're calling that class method, person with name. It's doing that auto-release thing, so we don't have to clean up the memory right here. And because we're calling this through the property, the retain count is being set, so we're actually holding on to that object. So even though at some point the system's going to say, hey, go ahead and release, that retain count is 2 because of the auto-release thing we set up, and because of this self.myPerson. So that'll be, so we're fine with that. Okay, so we've set up our person. The other thing we should go ahead and do is, now that we have our person, let's go ahead and access our name label and our age label. So self.name label .text equals self.myPerson.name and self.age label.text equals self.myPerson.age. So what we've done right now is basically when this view loads up, we've got some information in there and we should be able to see it just fine. Yes?
Isn't the text of that string and age so that's your target?
That is actually a very good point, and the compiler will tell us so. So definitely, right? Age is an int, text is not. So let's do something a little bit different and say, let's make an NS string. Let's see here. Which NS string methods to use? So let's do NS string with format. So string with format is pretty much like printf that you're used to. So inside this string section here where I've got @ what I can do is say %d for a decimal number or an int, and then I can say comma, and then I can access self.person.age. So again, what should happen here is basically we're creating an NS string and we're assigning it to text. What I'm not sure about is whether .text will do a retain or a copy. I'm not really sure. So let's see. We have a UI label, and UI label has text in it. Let's see if it has some properties. So yes, so if we look, text from the UI label has this non-atomic and copy set up. So what that means is when I do that NS string with format, that's going to return me whatever string, the setter is going to copy that string, and so everything will be fine. We'll actually be holding on to that string. So at some point that will get deallocated when that age label goes away. Okay, so we've got view did load, and let's see if this builds and runs at this point. Okay, so I'm getting some build errors too. All right, so can't use object as parameter to method is the first thing I'm getting. So let's see. Can't use object as parameter. Oh, yes, thank you. All right, so hopefully in the .h I have that correct. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so now build and run, and hopefully we'll see a person's name and an age, Bob Dole, and he's 87. Yes? So if you're getting a synthesized property error, then you may have forgotten to synthesize the property.
Where was the error that you corrected?
This error is in person.m in the implementation file. And then as far as synthesized type stuff, make sure that at the very top, if it's what file is it happening for in you?
It's happening in personviewcontroller.m.
Okay, so in personviewcontroller.m, make sure that at the top you've got these three, which you may have missed me putting in this one. So then just make sure that over here you've got this thing in the .h. Yeah. Okay, so if you also have that, well, we'll have to look at that later. Okay, so now we've got our model, we've got a person, and we've got a view controller, and we can look at it. Now let's go ahead and edit the person. So let's create another view controller, set up some text fields, and make some changes, and see that that's all updated and works out. So let's see here. There's so many ways to start. We can start an interface builder. We can start in Xcode. I really don't know. We'll start here in Xcode, and let's create. Actually, I made some notes, so I should see. Yeah. Well, let's just make some new files. And in this case, what we're going to do, we're going to now, so we have a person view controller. Now we're going to make a person editor view controller so we can edit this person. And usually on the iPhone, for every screen that you have, you will generally have another view controller for it. So what we're going to end up doing is eventually we'll add a button to our current view controller or current view, and when we push that button, it will let us edit our person. So we're going to have a different view controller where we can do some editing. So let's see, we're going to do some user interface stuff. Okay, so a Cocoa Touch class, and then one of the options is UI view controller. So we'll select that, and if any of the options are clicked, make sure you turn them off. So the one that might be defaulted is this one. We're going to create our nib ourselves later, so make sure that one's off. And next. So this is going to be our person editor view controller. Okay, so again in here, we're going to want to have a reference to a person because, right, model view controller, the controller is the intermediary between the views and the models, so person's our model, so let's go ahead and make a person in here, my person. And let's go ahead and set up two text fields. UI text field, and let's see, this will be name text field. And this one will be age text field. And we'll set some properties, non-atomic retain for both of these. And yes, we do want some IB outlets on those. Thank you. So we want IB outlets on those because we're going to go ahead and hook into them from the interface builder. And let's see. So what else do we need here? So because we're dealing with these UI text fields, we're probably going to want to use to adopt the UI text field delegate. Protocol, and that will bring us in some useful functions that we can implement. Okay, so we've got sort of the initial part of this. Let's synthesize our properties. And name text field and age text field. Okay, so again, we've got this. What we're going to want to do is set up this view did load function so that we get a chance, eventually once the nib gets loaded, we can do some sort of setup. In this case, what we'll do is we'll grab data from the model and put it inside the text fields so that they're there by default, and then we'll be able to edit them. So self.name textfield.text equals, and I don't know if I'll need a property later, but we'll just go this route. In this case, myperson.name is that, and then self.age textfield.text is myperson.age. So, okay, let's see, what do we have? So we've got initial portions of our view controller. View did load will set the text. So, I don't know, now's feeling like a good time to get the actual nib file going, and so we can hook some things up and then see what else we're missing. Yes? Correct. So same as last time, we need this string with format. I really shouldn't have used an int, because now it's going to appear all over the place. And then eventually I need like a string to int thing, which I don't know, I don't remember. I'm sure there is one, yeah. Okay, so let me grab that thing again. So we're going to do something similar. And we didn't set up a property this time, so I'll just get rid of that. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a nib file. So if we click on Resources, Add, New File, and click on Interface, let's set up a view nib. So that'll be the option we choose. And the name is going to be Person Editor View Controller. And if we go ahead and open that up, basically there's not much going on. It's just a very vanilla view. So one of the first things that we're going to want to do, so usually we know our file's owner has something, some sort of class that lives outside of Interface Builder. So right now if we look, it's just this NS object. So we know that we have a person editor view controller .h and .m. So that's the class that we want this view controller's file owner to be. So if we click over in the inspector on the 4th tab, what you can do is, you can start typing. And probably if I do a drop down, well, I guess it's not in there, but so person editor view controller. So now we've set the file's owner to be that. And let's see, we want to have some text fields on here, so let's go ahead and add some text fields. So we've got our name, and we'll make our age one. And now we need to connect it to the file's owner, to our outlets. So this one's going to be the age text field. And this one's going to be the name text field. So hopefully those are nice and set. And if we click on them and look in the inspector, we see that they're pointing to file's owner, both of them. The other thing that we want to do is we want, so the person editor view controller is our text field delegate. So when we're doing whatever it is we're doing with the text field, we want the text view controller to know. So let's go ahead and set the delegate for the text field. So so you saw the first way, right? I dragged from the text field over to the file's owner and made the connection. The other way, of course, is you can select the text field, and then over in this connection browser, we see that one of the that the outlet that the text field has is the delegate. So we can. All right, let me move this. So what we can do is actually go from here, drag to the file's owner, and that delegate is now set as well. So let's see, we've got some delegates set, or we have some outlets set. The other thing that we need to do, if we look at the file's owner, the view is not set to anything. So what we want to do is we want to set the view to the view that's here. So that connection is there. If you remember from last time, the big walkthrough from main, or from main to NS application, whatever it was, and we went through all these things. Eventually there was something that said controller.view. Well, so this is that view at this point. So we have a view in our nib, so we want it to load. So we need to make this connection. Okay, so now we have this. Let's head back to the person editor view controller. So what should happen now when this thing loads, view did load should get called, and we're going to be grabbing my person name and putting it into the text field, and the age as well. So let's see. Next up, yes.
If we got a file view controller, would it know how that work for us by connecting all that?
I'm sorry, one more time?
We got to make a new view controller, a new class, and naming a person, editor view controller. Would it have done all that connecting for us by creating a new file instead?
I'm not sure. It probably would have. It would have set up some of the initial connections for you, most likely. I haven't, I'm not sure, but it'd be easy to check.
Also, do you have these calls right here to my person? Those aren't actually on the Bob domain 7, right? 'Cause those are that should be different instantiation than class.
Right, so what will happen at some point so we're about to start tying these things together. So what will happen is when we, so maybe now's a good time to sort of start with some of that. What we're going to do is we're going to set up a pointer to this view controller from the other view controller, and then we're going to kind of make all the little connections that we need to make. So maybe now's a good time to do that. So let's head back to the person view controller, and let's create an action. So we're going to set up a button called edit, and we need an action, IB action, edit. And as long as we're about to do this kind of stuff, let's do a forward declaration for person editor view controller. And what we'll do is now we'll set up our connection to that other controller. I'll just call it PVC, person view controller, or edit. Yeah. And let's go ahead and set up a property as well for it. Okay, so now we'll have an outlet that will connect shortly. And actually, let's go ahead and just make that connection right now. So back to Interface Builder in this time the person view controller. So if we look inside the person view controller, we don't have a person editor view controller. So again, Command-Shift-L to bring up the library, and you type controller, we'll see one of the options that we have in there is a view controller. So we'll go ahead and grab that and just throw it inside there. And if we look at it, its type is just, again, it's just some generic UI view controller. So let's go ahead and make it a person editor view controller type. So you can zoom in and see that there. And the other thing we want to do is we want to actually give it a nib name. So we know that this person editor view controller lives back here in these grayed out windows. That's the nib that we set up. So we'll go ahead and give it its name, person editor view controller, which, that was its name, person editor view controller.nib. And so what will happen now at some point when its view is called, it will get loaded from this nib file. So we have our controller here. We need to actually make a connection to it, connect the outlet. So from files owner to person controller, we see the little outlet that we made.
How did you get the person editor view controller to come?
Okay, so Command-Shift-L, and you start typing controller, what you'll get is this view controller item that pops up, and you can take it and drag it over into your person view controller.zib file. And then from there, you're going to set the type. You can either do it, you can actually do it here by, I thought you could, by double clicking, but you do it from here, set its class type, and then from here, you want to set the nib name, so that's the file that gets loaded, and then make sure that you've connected the files owner to the person editor view controller that we just added. And we save that. So now I think, so there's a lot of stuff going on, so I might be forgetting some things, but we'll see as we go, because if it doesn't run, which it shouldn't run right now because there's some more things we need to do, but the compiler's doesn't care. It'll just tell us what's wrong and what's not. So, or it'll tell us what's wrong. So it's fickle that way, I guess. So we have our person view controller. Oh, we also have this edit action. So let's go ahead and put an edit. So in our view, so our view has some labels. They're kind of hard to see, I guess, because I didn't actually put anything in them. And yeah, I guess we won't worry about it for now. But so Command-Shift-L, button. Let's go ahead and add an edit button in here. And we want the edit to call the edit action that we set up in our person view controller. So we make that connection. So I think as far as connections go, I think things are set up. Now back in the code, we want to actually go ahead and implement edit. So edit, basically what we want to do now when we push edit is we want to go to a different screen, which is our other view controller, where we can actually do the things that we want to do. So I always forget, but let's see, I think it's self parent view controller, present modal view controller, and in this case it's our thing called PE, person editor view controller, and animated will say yes. So basically this is the magic right here. So we've gone through all this stuff, we've set up these nibs and these classes, and now when we push edit, we can tell, so we have this member variable, or this, this parent view controller that's sort of taking care of things, where we'll say, hey, here's this other controller I'd like you to present. So go ahead and do that. And while you're at it, why don't you go ahead and animate it for me so that it looks really pretty and looks like I did a lot of work. But yes?
Is there a question, or is there a reason you did present mobile view control on the view controller instead of yourself? That you are
That's just sort of the way that I'm used to doing it. I think, I don't have a good answer for that, but I'll think about it. If you ask me again, not in class, I'll probably have a better answer. So answer is I'm not sure, but that's just the way I'm familiar with how to do it. Yes?
Do we have to set up another way to get back to it?
Yes, so what we're going to eventually do is we're going to go into the person editor view controller. There's going to be a done button. And when you're done, you're going to basically undo this, like pop. I don't remember what that one's called either, but we'll see as I start typing. So before we do this, though, it's probably a good idea to go ahead and say self.pevc dot. So looks like I did need, I needed to set up a property for my person in that other class. And so this is basically where, we have reference to the same model data. And what we're saying is that the person editor view controller, it's my person, is now pointing to my person. So let me head back over and see that I did not create a property, so I should set one up. So now I'm in the person editor view controller, property, non-atomic, retain, and person, my person. So now we have our property. We need to synthesize it so we can access it. My person. So now self, grab our person editor view controller, which I need to also synthesize here. Okay, so what should happen now, it'll be interesting to see. So there are a bunch of things that we still have left to set up, but let's just build and run just for kicks to see what happens. Hopefully things compile or not. So accessing unknown myPerson component of a property. So everything's saved. Anyone see what I've...
Do we need to hand myPerson in through the edit instead of this is who we edit?
So this is sort of what we're doing right here. What we're saying is we're accessing in this line that's selected where the error is happening. We're saying person editor view controller, you have a pointer to myPerson. Go ahead and set it to the one that we have. So that one we should be able to access here. I think it's so I'm in person view controller, person view. So let me check person editor view controller. So we have our property, non-atomic retained person. Is this all spelled correctly? myPerson. Okay, and I did synthesize it, I thought. Synthesize myPerson. So this is, some of the stuff that goes on when you try to code live. So that shouldn't be PEVC.
You need to import person.h and...
thank you. Okay, so thank you very much. That's exactly it. So what's happened is, oops, I don't know what I just changed in here. I guess we'll find out shortly. So inside the person editor view controller, we did our forward declaration of person, but we never actually imported it. So now, hopefully, okay, one less thing. No, same thing. Oh, you're right. I did import it here. The person view controller editor. Yes, thank you very much. Okay, so now things build. And let's see what happens if we actually click some buttons and do some stuff. Okay, so that's not quite doing what it should be doing. So let me check my other one where I did stuff because we're running out of time. And so test me view controller. So yeah, you're right. Sonny, you were right about that question that you were asking me in terms of why do it on the parent. We just want to do this self. So this guy now jumps up. So yeah, thank you.
What was the change?
So the change was there used to be inside edit, there was self, parent, something, something, do some stuff. Basically get rid of all that and just say self, present modal view controller. I don't know what the parent, if that one was part of the other one, probably. Yeah, that one was in the other guy, which we'll take a look at shortly. All right, so we have like 2 minutes, so let's see if we can actually get that going in 2 minutes. So now we have this, we've got Bob Dole, we can change the name, we can do something, but nothing's really going on because we haven't implemented the functions. So I'm going to say we probably don't have enough time. I don't want to just rush through this last part. So I say I'll finish that piece next time. Basically, what we need to do now is just implement these delegate methods so that we know we've hit return, and add like a finished button so that we can return to the previous view controller. Yes. Sure, I will post the code as is for next session. So if you feel like playing around and trying to get it to like finish it yourself, then just know we need to implement the delegates for the text field, add a done button that dismisses the view controller. So, okay, I think that's a good time to end the recording, and then we'll talk more.
This function that we had here in the previous board. And when you finally do that, and for lack of time, I won't go through all the details, but it's straightforward. Okay, when you do all that, you add all the probabilities together, you find that the total transition probability into this set of states in the vicinity of K, 2 pi over h bar squared, the matrix element for your perturbing potential, Km, absolute value squared, number you generated with the computer, and then the density of states, omega sub Km, evaluated at the place where omega Km is equal to omega. In other words, we're going to take the case where your photon comes in, has exactly the right frequency to kick the electron up to a higher energy and absorb that photon. And so you evaluate this at that particular change in energy that we're talking about right there. And you see the whole thing turns out to be proportional